Hi, everybody.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Being that I've been here the last number of weeks,
Right.
right, and not next week, but during the summer, I'll be in and out, Mitzvah Hashem. So I decided to do something that I've been contemplating doing for years, and I haven't done it. While preparing for the class, I realized it's going to take more preparation than I knew, than I thought. And I was actually inspired by Rabbi Siderson, who recently on Shabbos afternoons at Shalashudas at the third Shabbos meal, it's not every week, but he decided to do biographies of great people. Okay, and talk about some of our great leaders, some contemporary, some Middle Ages, some even before. He happened to be doing the Chazon Ish. He just finished somebody who passed away, I think in December of 53 or February of 54, somewhere around that. So that's fairly contemporary. And I thought that I would do a similar thing. And especially if I'm going to be, I'm hoping even the weeks that I'm not here, there'll be people taking my place. But if I'm in and out during the summer, so these are sort of self-contained units. So I hope you find it of interest. As I say, it's really the first time I'm doing something like this. So hopefully it'll make sense what I'm saying, or that you'll find it meaningful and inspiring. The first person that I want to talk about, actually, I figured that I'd do something a little different. I'm going to start with a woman, okay? And I want to speak about Rebbetzin Batsheva Kanievsky. Batsheva, and her last name, Kanievsky. And you have heard me speak many, many, many times about her husband, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, of blessed memory, who passed away 2.5 years ago on Shushan Purim. Perhaps at, I don't know how, when people died 2,000, 3,000 years ago in Israel, I don't know how many people came to the funeral, but it's hard for me to imagine that any Jew ever had a funeral with 1 million people, which is what they think Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky had. They also said a similar thing about Rabbi Yosef, the chief Sephardi rabbi, Chacham Ovadia, who passed away maybe 10 years before, 8 years before. It was in Bnei Brak. Started outside his home, and it went to the cemetery in Bnei Brak. It was interesting when I looked up online that I wanted to talk about what the outside of the house looked like on basically a daily basis outside Rabbi Kanievsky's home, because I was there numerous times, so I saw it. But when I typed in Google, and I tried a number of different things of typing in, lines outside 23 Rashbam, lines outside the home of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky to go visit him, it just came up with pictures from the funeral, and which I had seen many times. But you can see overhead, you see. I don't know how many blocks of just a sea of black. But the amazing thing about him, that it was not only the black that came to the funeral from all over Israel, secular Jews, Haredi Jews, Hasidic Jews. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about Reb Chaim when we talk about the Rebbetzin, but I don't want to focus on Reb Chaim. I want to focus on Rebbetzin Batsheva. Rebbetzin Batsheva was born around 1930. Her father was Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv. Rabbi Elyashiv passed away in 2012, and she predeceased him, actually. His daughter predeceased him because Rabbi Elyashiv lived to be 102 years old. So a number of his children predeceased him, most in not young, let's put it that way, not young. And so she grew up in a home of greatness. She grew up in a home where the study of Torah reigned supreme. Rabbi Elyashiv eventually became the primary decisor of Jewish law, of halacha, in in our time. I would say the last 10 years, 20 years of his life, in the 2000s until he passed away in 2012, he, day in, day out, he answered questions, and he wrote books and other people wrote books with the response that he gave. So she grew up in a home that didn't know anything besides that. And her mother was such that she wanted nothing more than her husband to be a great Torah scholar, and she did everything possible. She had 11 children. I believe she had 11 children, and she did everything possible to make it sure that her husband would not be disturbed from his learning and that he would be able to study. And interestingly enough, is that Rebbe Elyashiv, this is rare, it's not unheard of, but it's rare. After his youth and his teen years, he spent most of his time studying on his own. There was a little shul in the Mea She'arim section of Yerushalayim called Ohel Sarah, Sarah's tent. It was called Ohel Sarah, and he would sit there from morning till night, day after day after day, for decades, and study. And what was interesting about him is that many interesting things. I had the privilege of meeting him a number of times, but not having any conversations with him, but greeting him a few times. And is that the way he used to learn is he would, let's say he was studying a piece of Gemara, and you can see online, they have hidden videos of him studying. Like, he doesn't move his head from the books. It's amazing. But the way he would do it is he, in a very sweet voice, he would read the texts and then he would discuss it. But if you were not inside the room, you would think that there were two people who were in the room. He locked the door of Ohel Sarah. So sometimes if somebody stood up, you can get a glimpse through a window, whatever, but if you could hear him, and you would think what he did, he would do question answer to himself to make sure they had absolute clarity and everything, not just studying it and, okay, and then moving on. He did the debates of the Gemara. He did the debates of the earlier commentaries. He talked everything over to the point that there was one cleaning lady who used to come occasionally to clean that shul, Ohel Sarah, and she said, she was not a learned person. She said that he was so clear in his study. She used to stand there sometimes listening to him, that by the time she finished listening to him, she could repeat the Gemara that he was studying. So, he was, I'll tell you one other thing, which this is way beyond my pay grade and way beyond anything that I could really understand. But at the end of her life, the Rebbetzin, who predeceased Rabbi Elyashiv, this is Rabbi Kanievsky's mother, right? She was ill and she went to the hospital and she had pneumonia or something. And she had grandchildren always sleeping in the house at the end to make sure that she was taken care of, that her husband was taken care of. And one night, her in the middle of the night, this was like just a couple of days before she passed away, her grandson came into her room to check on her in the middle of the night, and she wasn't there. And her grandfather was sleeping. Rabbi Elyashiv was sleeping. He slept just a few hours a night, and they didn't have a very big apartment, so he didn't have a lot, And she went out and she found her grandmother was an elderly, ill woman on the porch, on the outside, on the mirpeset. I don't know if she was sitting, if she was lying down, I don't know. And he said, "Bubby, Savta, what are you doing out here?" And she said, she came from the hospital and she still had pneumonia, and she had to cough. She was going through a severe coughing spell. She was afraid of waking up her husband in the middle of the night, lest his Torah studies the next day be disturbed because he woke up in the middle of the night. So she went out of the room, out of the little apartment, to cough so that it wouldn't. That's not something that I could imagine it, but it's not something that I live with, right? And my wife is great, but she doesn't have that problem of me waking up in the middle of the night and missing a minute to study the next day. So this is not about her. This is about me.
She has only 10, not 11.
They were grown by then, grown and married. Rabbi Elyashiv, when he left this world at age 102, had over 1,000 descendants. He had great grandchildren.
He's on time.
So that's amazing. And he was an only child. Elyashiv was an only child. My point is that she grew up in a home where Torah learning reigned supreme, and she wound up marrying somebody who eventually became the primary resource, the greatest scholar. I think there's no question about that, of the generation. What's amazing about her father is that one time somebody once commented to her that it must be something having a father who was the greatest masmid, the most diligent student of the generation, and being married. So what she said, yes, my husband is a big masmid, aber zum Taten kommt nicht. It doesn't come from my father. My father was like, that's what she said about her own father. Okay, so she was born into that household. She was also born on her mother's side. Her grandfather was the tzaddik of Yerushalayim. His name was Rabbi Aryeh Levine. There's a book written by Feldheim about him, and the book about him came out before most of the current biographies were written. His biography was called A Tzaddik in Our Time. It was revised with additional stories a number of years ago. And Rabbi Aryeh Levine, besides being a scholar and a great man, was known as being the most pious, kind, loving person, the greatest chesed that one could imagine. Rabbi Aryeh Levine. In my last May, when I was in Israel, went to visit a grandson of his with my family. He was also quite a man, but yes.
This Aryeh Levine, where did he live?
He lived in Shari Chesed or the Mishkan in Jerusalem somewhere. We had
I think I knew an Aryeh, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. So.
Yeah, we had an Aryeh Levine here in Denver. He came from Europe and he lived here on Tennyson Street, but that wasn't him either. He lived, I don't know where he was born, but I think he lived in Yerushalayim his whole life. He was also known as the rabbi of the prisoners. When the British, took all these people and threw them in the clinker, he would go visit them, and he would make friends and followers and out of the most tough, gruff, nasty prisoners. They would melt like butter in his hands. So, and again, maybe one day we'll do a unit on Rabbi Aryeh Levine. He was an incredible person. My point is that she grew up. She was very, very close. Rebbetzin Kanievsky was very, very close to her grandfather. So she grew up in a house which was like, out of a scale of 1 to 10, on a 12, both in terms of chesed and in terms of Torah knowledge, but not only Torah knowledge, Torah diligence, and like their life being shaped and formed by the Torah. Now, a person doesn't become great overnight. And her husband, and she lived in Bnei Brak and Rehov Rashbam, and which eventually became a stop. We'll talk more about it later, perhaps, for many, many hundreds of people, thousands of people every week that would come to Reb Chaim. So I would say that Reb Chaim passed away, 2022? I think 2022, 2023. 2023. Yeah, 2023. So he was already known for his greatness for many, many years, when people from all over the world came to seek his blessing and his counsel and his advice. But he was already known before that as a great person. Rebbetzin Batsheva Kanievsky didn't make it into the limelight until later on. I mean, she was busy raising the family, and even though she was a woman who was tremendously full of chesed and kindness, which we'll talk about, but her husband was in the limelight. But eventually, which is not so common. I mean, people know sometimes about the wives of these great rabbis, and they're great themselves. But she became almost like a figure herself of greatness that people would go to also for advice and blessings. It's known of Chaim, people used to come to him. Sometimes he would say, the Rebbetzin can answer that better than I can. Or you want a blessing on that? I can't, but the Rebbetzin can give you a blessing, right? And we'll talk about the efficacy of her blessings in a few minutes. Now, the type of person that she was that their door in their home, and again, I don't know how it was when her children were small. That's not when most people have the books written about them, right? So what we know most about her life and her husband's life is when the children were already grown. So, but their door was open at all times of day and night. People came in. Sometimes they knocked. Sometimes they didn't knock. I will tell you that at the end of his life, when he was already in his 80s and 90s, Reb Chaim had visiting hours, and people would come every day. Hundreds and hundreds of people from around the world would come every day. And he had a staircase of maybe, 15 steps, 20 steps leading up to his house. And you were packed like sardines. And I see Reb Tzvi is on here. A number of years ago, I went. It wasn't the first time I had gone to Reb Chaim, but Reb Tzvi was in Eretz Yisrael, and I took him to see Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And that was an important issue that we needed to discuss with him. And Reb Tzvi was standing on the bottom of the staircase, and I was wiggling my way up through because I had a connection with one of the grandsons of somebody, and he told me he would get me in. Most people got in, some just for a very, very short time, some for a little bit longer. But because I had made the appointment sort of, and I knew somebody there, so they told me to come in. So I'm squeezing through, and I'm squeezing at the bottom of the staircase. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but I said, come on up. But like, he's a yeshiva bacher now, but he wasn't a yeshiva bacher his whole life. He doesn't know how to make his way through a crowd where there's no possible way to make your way through. You got to be a yeshiva bacher to know how to do that, right? And without fighting, just pushing your way through. So I reached my hand down. When he comes in later, he'll tell you how he remembers it. And I sort of pulled him up the staircase, like pulling him through the people until we got to the top of the staircase and into the apartment, which was lined with books. When you first came into the apartment, it was shelves and shelves and shelves of books that he wrote. That's how he made a meager living, by selling his books. And he also had books that his father had written, and he sold books. He was the only son of his father. He had sisters, but he was the only son of his, so he sold his father's books. When his sister, interestingly enough, one sister of his husband died young, with a number of children. So two things: even though like his day was accounted for from morning till night, every day for years after davening, he would go visit his sister because there was no man in the house, just to say hello, to check how he was, and also after their father died, the Stipler, in 1986, he was making a few meager pennies from selling his father's books. When his brother-in-law died, he said, all the income from the books now goes to my sister because her husband's not alive. How is she going to make it? So even that little bit of income that he had, he gave over to his sister. But the door was like, Reb Tzvi, I see around there. Is that how you remember it?
Yes.
Okay. Then.
You dragged me up by my lapels.
Not by your arm, I dragged you up by your lapels.
By my lapels.
What is some kind of healers?
What's that?
Some kind of healers.
That also, they were, but he wasn't known as a healer. He was known for the efficacy of his blessing.
They could have been there for questions because she won't come.
They were there for many, many, many different reasons. They were there, but the door was open at all times, and people came in, and to her, people would come in to ask recipes. She was an old lady. She would go babysit for her neighbor when the child wasn't there. She would go shopping. It was such that the men used to come to her also, but women used to come to her. They lived literally, and later in their life, it was even less, at the last years of his life, because from his apartment, which was a flight up, there was a shul over here, and his apartment was over here, so he had to go down the stairs and walk like a minute. So it took 2 minutes to get from his apartment to the shul. And she would daven, again, later in life. I'm sure she didn't do this when she was when she had little children. 3 times a day, she would go to shul. And her husband always davened the sunrise minyan, Nates. So he davened, she was always there. And sometimes when davening was over, it would take her an hour to walk the 2-minute walk because so many people came over to her to ask her for things and to seek her advice and counsel and blessing just on the way home. So one afternoon, there was a friend of mine was there, and he was standing on the line waiting to come in, and somebody opened the door and said it was the night before Hoshana Rabbah, like now Shavuos night. Many people stay up all night to learn. Some people stay up the last night of Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah. There are people who do that as well. Now, Reb Chaim did not sleep a lot, but knowing that but when he slept, it was on his schedule, and he slept. But the day before Shana Rabbah, knowing that he was planning on staying up all night, so he went for a little bit of a longer nap during the day. So the Gabbai, the one who was in charge, a grandson usually, opened the door and told the people waiting, it's before Shana Rabbah, and the Rav is resting, and when the door opens, you'll know that you can come in, and that's when he's accepting people again. Okay, so the door closes, and my friend is standing there, and all of a sudden, a little girl, like 7 or 8 years old, wiggles her way through the crowd, and she starts banging on the door. Harabanit, Rabbanit, like Rebbetzin, and people are saying she's sleeping. She's, if her husband is taking a nap, that's the only time she gets to nap. So she wouldn't give up. So finally, about 2 minutes later, the door opens, and the Rebbetzin is standing there, clearly having just woken up. And she looks down, she sees the little girl, and her face just breaks out in a smile. This was a neighbor. I have no idea what she wanted. You wouldn't know that she had just been asleep. She didn't show one bit of aggravation. You didn't see all these people. No, the 7-year-old girl needed something. She loved everybody. I want to read a quote that I wrote from her. She said, it says that she babysat, she cooked, she cared for the sick and the troubled. She worked also to bring peace between people and husbands and wives, parents and children, friends and friends. She did a lot of mediating between people, right? And she raised and distributed millions of dollars discreetly and without fanfare to help widows and orphans. When a wealthy person would come there, Rabbi Chaim wouldn't ask for anything, but sometimes if she knew, they would ask, can I be helpful? And she would say she has needs for this tzedakah. She raised millions of dollars that way and distributed these funds to people. But she said, I really, really love everyone who walks through my door. I mean, it's not like she had such an Ahavas Yisrael, so she said, oh, now I understand. She said, why people come to see me. She said, because it's reflective of how I feel about them. So as King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, Kamayim haponim al ponim kein lev ha'adam el ha'adam. Like water reflects a person's face. You look at the water, however you look at it, it looks back at you the same way. Just in reverse, but but it looks back at you the same way like a mirror. So too does a person's heart reflect what's coming out of the heart. So if you really have a real concern and care and love or like for the person, then the person will feel it, right? As it says, Dvarim hayotzim min halev nichnosim min halev, things that come from the heart enter the heart, right? And you could, I don't know, we always feel, but oftentimes you feel when somebody's talking to you from the heart, you feel it. Not always, but usually you can tell the difference between a sincere apology and one that says, "If I hurt you, I apologize." Right? Okay, so that's so people came constantly to see her. She had unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. She would have people, secular people, who didn't know better, and they came to her home dressed, let's put it this way, not appropriate for Bnei Brak, which is the most yeshivish Orthodox city in the world. I mean, maybe Kiryas Yoel in Monroe, Muncie, in Monroe in the upstate New York, but it's a much smaller. Bnei Brak has well over 100,000 people. I don't know how many, but well over 100,000. And it didn't matter. She would hug them, she would kiss them, she would welcome them in and treat them like her own daughter. It didn't matter. If somebody came to her, she was there for them. She daily studied this book. It wasn't this copy, but daily. I've told you that my mother used to study this every Shabbos, not the entire book. It's the Igeres Ramban. It's the letter that Nachmanides wrote to his son on proper behavior. She used to, I don't know if she read the whole thing every day. I mean, it's not that long, but she would read parts of it every day. And I just want to read a little bit of what the Ramban wrote to his son as a letter. He wrote, accustom yourself to speak gently to all people at all times. If you haven't figured it out, the Ramban didn't write this in English. This is a translation, okay? That's because he was in Spain, so obviously, okay? It wasn't in Spanish either. Yeah. Okay, speak gently to all people at all times. This will protect you from anger, a most serious character flaw, which causes one to sin. And then he goes on to some of the evils of anger, what anger does. He says, once you have distanced yourself from anger, right, and you're in control, the quality of humility will enter your heart. And he says, this sterling quality of humility is the finest of all admirable traits. Humility is the finest trait. And it's like sincerity. Don't fake sincerity. It's not sincere. Right? People can fake humility, but then you're not humble, and it'll come through. On the heels of humility comes fear of Hashem. So it's interesting. On the heels of anger, controlling anger, comes humility, and with true humility comes fear of Hashem, comes reverence of Hashem. Just a couple of other things. After you give serious thought to these ideas, you will stand in awe of your Creator and will be guarded against sin. Once you have acquired these fine qualities, you will indeed be happy with your lot. So if you have those things and you're truly humble and you don't get angry at somebody else, so you're going to wind up being happy with what you have. And then he writes about the terrible things that come with arrogance or false pride, right? So it's not that long a letter, but it's an incredible letter. She learned this every day, and she lived. She lived with the teachings of the Ramban. I mean, you wouldn't see her getting upset. She recognized also an important thing. She recognized that everybody excelled in something, and she would always try to find the good in people. I just saw something astounding. The original Ger Rebbe, the Chidush Harim, Rabbi Meir Alter, he probably was in the mid-1800s. He said an amazing thing. He said for 10 years, he worked on only seeing the good in people. For 10 years. And he finally, this is actually, I found this humorous, but I found it insightful. And finally, after the 10 years, he wound up becoming Rebbe. He didn't want to, but when the Kutzker Rebbe died, he was his primary student, and the students of them said, you have to become our Rebbe. He did. He said, and then for 10 years, I looked at trying to be able to find a fault in people or something wrong, because people would come to him with their problems, and he would say, and but also for their spiritual growth, and he would that's not you, because he only saw the good in people. So he said he had to undo all the 10 years of learning to be able to see, to believe that people actually had faults. He didn't like to see the faults in people. So I thought that was interesting. Okay. Again, my friend David Greengrass was there once, and the Rebbetzin had collapsed. By the way, she died at age 79. I think it was Cholamoid Sukkot, the intermediate days of Sukkot, and she was sitting on the couch in her apartment in Bnei Brak, and her soul just left. And by the time they called Hatzalah to revive her, it was too late. She was gone. And they say that Reb Chaim, he had an incredible relationship with her. And even though he continued with his schedule and everything, they said that after he died, he was not the same person as he was before then. Yeah, he was very, very, very close to her. He consulted with her. He respected her. He honored her. He recognized how great she was, and it was a mutual thing. There's a very cute video that's out there online that came out after Reb Chaim died. It was like early in the morning, because he used to get up very early in the morning, and he would say the morning blessings. So, but he wanted somebody to answer Amen. When he said the bracha, someone should answer Amen, So he would say them, she would answer Amen. Then when he would finish, she would say them, and he would answer Amen to her brachas. They just had this they did this for each other, and they were with each other at 4:00 in the morning every day, when they got up. So, so one time she went to the hospital, and she had collapsed. And the doctors, when they checked her out, they said, you spend too much time with other people. You have too much stress from people. You're not getting enough sleep. And so she came home and she told us that the people asked her, what was the matter? So she said, so what did the doctors say? So she said, the doctors say I have to spend more time by myself and I have to spend less time with people. And so they asked her, are you going to? She said, of course not. Now it's time to spend more time with people, because this must be a message from heaven that, something happened to me. The Almighty wants me to use even more of my strength. It's not quite the same as reminiscent of my mother, Alea Shalom. And, my mother was not Rebbetzin Kanievsky, but my mother was my mother. So if she could put up with me, she was, no. But I love this story. I remember this story amazingly. When my mother, about she must have been in her early to mid 60s, and she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And her mother-in-law, my paternal grandfather, she didn't understand the chesed that my mother did, always helping people and staying up late and inviting guests and doing this and that. She did that until her last days when she was in the nursing home at the end of her life. Even then, she didn't know it was, she died. She caught COVID at the beginning, and then she lived another 17 days, and she was in the hospital by herself, basically, and then she was gone. But she heard that there was something going on, but she didn't know how terrible it was. And they started taking people into, to seclude them in their rooms. My mother used to go from room to room because she heard that these people were very weak. So she would wheel herself to rooms to help these people out. She probably caught COVID from one of them, and she didn't know. So, I mean, even in that stage, she went to help people. But so when she was in her low to mid 60s, and when my paternal grandmother heard that she had Parkinson's, she said, "Finally, you're going to be able to slow down. Now you know that you have this. You're going to have to take it easy, and you have to you pamper yourself a little more." And I remember my mother saying, just the opposite. How many more years do you think I'll have of being able to do this the way that I help people? I have to double down my efforts, because in a few more years, I won't be able to do it anymore. So I have to be even more so. And then when she used to say to her, "But you have to get your rest," my mother used to say, "I'll have my rest. No, I'm worried about my rest." So I saw that with my own mother. Right? So she felt that everybody was her best friend. By the way she said it in Hebrew, when they asked her what her response was to the doctor, she would say, "Eze she'ela. What kind of question is that? I have to add more to what I'm doing." That's what Rebbetzin Kanievsky said. Everybody felt she was a best friend, which is why sometimes, even if they weren't resting in the afternoon, if they had off hours, oftentimes people would come to the house, because if you're a best friend, so you can come even in off hours. Well, all the women in the neighborhood felt that she was a best friend. So they would come bang on the door, even when it was off hours. So if they had to turn somebody away, they had to turn somebody away. Or if somebody got to that person before they got to the Rebbetzin and the Rav, so they got there, so then they sometimes wouldn't let them in the house. I don't know. But, if somebody needed to see them, they were always there to see them. She, as I said, like her husband, would dispense blessings to people openly and willingly, and we saw by her oftentimes that her blessings were fulfilled. I will tell you a story with her where one time a woman came into her house, a pregnant woman came into her house, and she came in crying, and she was devastated. And the Rebbetzin asked her, "What's the matter?" By the way, these stories that I'm telling you were these particular ones were experienced firsthand by this fellow who wrote the book, David Greengrass. You won't find his name on the book, because he didn't put his name on the cover of the book. I happen to know who it is. And she was devastated, because she said, "I just came from the hospital, and they did tests, and they told me that the fetus is the heartbeat stopped, and the baby, I've lost the baby." So I don't know why she came to the Rebbetzin, what she wanted from the Rebbetzin. So the Rebbetzin said, "Come here," and she held her for a moment, and then she put her hand on the stomach, and then she said, "Zelo emet, hayelad bari." She said, "It's not true." I wrote down the quote over here that she said, "It's not true. The baby is healthy and well. Zelo bari v'shalem, yelad bari v'shalem." That's what she said. It's a healthy and whole baby. Yelad bari v'shalem. It's a healthy baby, and zelo emet. It's not true. And then she told the lady, "Go back to the hospital and tell the doctors that what they said was wrong. That the baby's healthy and the baby's fine." And she went back to the hospital, and the doctor thought she was crazy. And she said, "This is what Rebbetzin Kanievsky told me," and the baby was fine. Right? The baby was fine. They had something a very strange thing, and I was shocked when I read this, that it actually took hold in Bnei Brak, out of all places. I mean, it's the only place, but they had something called, it was like it was a pendulum. It was a thing, and they had these facilitators I don't, who you'd look at you'd ask a question. I don't think this is permitted halachically, but there were these religious women in the neighborhood, and and depending on which way the pendulum would swing, they would give you an answer to your question. Sometimes they're very serious questions, and sometimes not. And they came to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. This fellow who wrote this book sent a letter to Rabbi Chaim, and he explained to him exactly what it was. And he asked Rabbi Chaim, is it permitted to do so? So he said, absolutely not. You're not allowed to do so. That's a violation of something that it says in the Torah. So he didn't say what it was, but he said it wasn't. So this fellow, then there was a woman in Bnei Brak who had a whole group of people, women at her work, who would use this thing, who would use these facilitators with this pendulum, which is strange. And one day he met her and he said, Reb Chaim says that it's forbidden. Reb Chaim says that it's forbidden. You shouldn't do it. So the lady said back to her, what do you mean it's forbidden? I heard that Rebbetzin Kanievsky herself does it. Right? So he said, Reb Chaim said it's forbidden, and he went and asked the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin said it's not true, that she never did it. She didn't. So the lady who he told, like, don't do it anymore. Tell your workers not to do it. Said, I can't go and tell them, because if I say that you said, nobody's going to believe me, right? Why should they believe me? Because I said that, you said that, he said. So she decided to go to Rebbetzin Kanievsky herself to ask her, right? So she came to Rebbetzin Kanievsky. She was pregnant when she went. She came to Rebbetzin Kanievsky, and she said to Rebbetzin Kanievsky, this is what they do. And she started to laugh. And she said, you can't do that, and you can't rely on them. What are you doing? She said, but they know what they're talking about. She says, give me an example. She says, they say sometimes the pregnant women, a lot of pregnant women, Baruch Hashem, in Bnei Brak, right? And I remember when I was in Italy, I remember 2 years ago during the summer, I was there for 6 days and 7 days. I remember one time we saw a pregnant woman, and one time we saw a person pushing children. Chai and I, wow, look, they actually do have pregnant women here. Children are born sometimes, like there were no children to be seen. It was unbelievable. Europe has this, they're doing it to themselves. Yeah. So she said, but people want to know, there's going to be a boy or a girl. A lot of people are curious when they're pregnant. Is it going to be a boy or a girl? So they use that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay. See.
It's quite accurate. It's unbelievable. I don't know how it works.
So the question, I don't know how it works yet. The question is if you're allowed to use it. So she said, she said, are you curious if you want to have a boy or a girl? So the lady said, yes. So she said, turn around. So she looks at her and she says, it's going to be a boy. And she was right. Like, she looked at the lady, she said, now I have to tell you a story that happened with my daughter. My daughter was at a wedding, and she heard that there was a woman there who was able to feel your pulse and know by the pulse if it's a boy or a girl. Yeah. And my daughter had heard from friends that this was true. This, for those of you who know it, this is Suri. Okay? Suri was at the.
She was only wrong 50% of the time.
Yeah. So let me tell you. So she went, and I don't know how it came about, but the woman wound up speaking to her. And she saw that Suri was pregnant. She took her pulse, and she said, I don't know what she said. It's a boy. Let's just say it's a boy. So, all right. Suri said, thank you very much. Suri was thinking to herself, it's a joke. She had twins. She didn't know, she was carrying twins. And it was towards the beginning of her pregnancy. And the lady was still holding her. And as Suri's thinking this, she says, hold on. There's another one in there, and it's a girl. And she was right. It was a boy and a girl.
Wow.
So I don't know about the pendulum, but apparently there is a chachma. There is something in there about being able to do that. There's as her husband grew in Torah and in renown, she also grew in her spiritual stature. There's a quote here. Great 18th century scholar. He was first from Czechoslovakia, then Germany. And he writes, as the husband grows in Torah and service of Hashem, if his wife is on board with him, so does she as well. And we saw that. With even though she's not the one studying, right? That she's the one supporting of it, and she's the one who allows it to happen. and not only allows it to happen, but wants it to happen, then the husband grows in his service of Hashem, as well. It was called Pendulum, but it's what I said. Pendulum testing is what it was. Is what it was called. Also, she had tremendous. The fellow who's writing this, and I'll finish in a minute or two. I have a few more things, but I'm just going to say one more. When he made a decision, when he came to study in Israel as a single guy, and then he got married and wound up, he made a point of becoming close to many of the great rabbis of the time, and he also wound up having a very close relationship with Rebbetzin Kanievsky. But he said he didn't want it to be one-sided, because he's constantly asking them things, looking at them. So he always wanted to do something to help them, and he found ways. It's incredible to read about, in which to help these great rabbis and Rebbetzins. But what do you give somebody who doesn't need anything, who thinks they have everything in the world, even though they're, monetarily they're poor? What do you give them? So he said one time, it's known by many of these great rabbis, what happens is one of two things happens. Either they have pens there because people come and they want to write down their requests and they give it to the rabbi, either because it's easier or sometimes they're hard of hearing, whatever the reason is, they write down their requests. It's an old Jewish thing to do. And they take the pens by mistake, right? And then you have all these pens and, so one time he came back from America and he brought back a bag of 1,000 cheap big pens, like the ones we have in the office, right? And he thought, that's a really weird gift. He gave it to her, and she was so happy. It was like the perfect gift, because we're constantly running out of pens. But the hakaras hatov that she expressed over a gift that cost him a few dollars was like, it was endless. And when people would come, they needed a pen. Rav David, he always, whatever, he always brought us something. And to see the way that she appreciated when something. Then eventually, with her husband, he wound up helping Rabbi Chaim write some of his books, which was a way that he was able to repay Rabbi Chaim for what Rabbi Chaim did for him. So this is a little bit about her. Perhaps we'll talk more about her. As I said, I want to talk about different people, and hopefully there's different things that we can learn from different people. I hope that you enjoyed it. Okay.
So this week's Parshas Nasso, is the longest single Parsha in the Chumash. Right? We've been through this before, but I'll ask you anyway. You can show off. How many psukim are there?
176.
176. Is that what you said, Therese?
179. So
176. 176. Do you know what the longest kapitel Tehillim is? You know what the longest Tehillim is out of the 150? Etta.
It's too good for me.
121. No.
119.
Oh, sorry. Didn't know.
119. You know how many psukim it has?
176.
176. And do you know what the longest Masechta in Talmud Bavli is? This is an advanced question.
176 pages.
Yeah, but do you know which Masechta it is? No.
Oh.
Bava Basra. Bava Basra. And it also has 176. So the longest Masechta in Talmud Bavli, which is the oral Torah, the longest single parsha in the Chumash is Nasso, which is 176, and the longest kapitel Tehillim is also 176. It's number 119, but it has 176 psukim. So since that's the longest of each one of those, you would think that that's the apex of Talmud Bavli, that's the apex of the Chumash, and it's the apex of Tehillim. So what's so special about 176? What's so special about 176, Etta?
How old I am.
I love that.
Ellen?
Something to do with it.
Which what?
What's so you have to be a little bit of a either a mathematician or a tax lawyer, or a retired tax lawyer also works. 176 is 8 times 22.
See,
So what's 22?
Letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
the letters in the alphabet.
The numbers of the letter in the aleph base, we say, not the alphabet, the aleph base. There's 22 letters, right? Not including the final letters. But there's 22 regular letters in the aleph base, right? 22. And what is 8? What's the significance of 8?
It's above. It's above heaven.
Right. It's above this world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Above this world. Because remember, we've talked about what's 6? What's 6? 6 is the material world, right? North, south, east, west, up, down. What's the middle of the 6 is the spirituality of the material world. So that's Shabbos in the 6 days of the week, for example, right? Or the inside of the sukkah. That's the holiness of those, that's holding together those 6 material walls is the spirituality of Shabbos. But then above that is 8. So 8 is above the world. That's why a bris, if a baby's born on Shabbos and it's healthy, then the following Shabbos they do the bris, even though doing the bris is things that would otherwise be Mechalel Shabbos, that would violate Shabbos. But the bris overrides Shabbos. Shmini Atzeres is the 8th day, right? It's the holiest day, really. It's the culmination of 2 cycles, the Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot cycle, and the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot cycle. Shmini Atzeres is the culmination of that, and that is also Shmini is the 8th. The Mishkan was inaugurated on Yom Shmini, which happened to be the first of Nisan, but it was the 8th day of Moshe's putting up for the first 7 days, putting up and taking down the Mishkan, and then it was finally inaugurated on the 8th day. And so 8 and 8, as we've gone through every parsha of Sefer Vayikra, which is itself above the world, because it's talking about the halachas of the Kohanim and of the Karbanos and things like that, of the offerings. And so that's also every single parsha in Sefer Vayikra has an 8 in it, right? The one that I had trouble with was Parshas Kedoshim. Where's the 8 in Parshas Kedoshim? We tried various different things. Even Rav David once told me, he said in English, if you add it up, it adds up to 8, but it doesn't in Hebrew. But how many psukim are there in Parshas Kedoshim?
8.
64. What's 64? Exactly. So everything that is really above this world, and then most of the things we don't understand, right, are 8s. And 8 is also, if you put it on its side, it's infinity. So, that Hashem knows everything, and so he puts everything in. If you're not coming to, that reminds me, if you're not coming to Discovery yet, you should make your reservations today. It's the last day to make reservations. Okay? That's Sunday, June 8th, this coming Sunday at 10 o'clock it starts.
Includes a free lunch.
And it's a real free lunch. It's not what you normally say, that there's no free lunch, right? It's a real free lunch.
Somebody's paying for it, but you don't.
Okay. Hello, Reb Shmuel. Hello, Selena. Okay. So Parshas Nasso is the longest single parsha of the Torah, 176. It's above the world. What makes it the apex of the Chumash, would you say? What makes it the apex of the Chumash? I think what makes it the apex of the Chumash is one, where it falls, and that is it always falls on the Shabbos after Shavuos. But Midbar is always a Shabbos before Shavuos, and Parshas Nasso is also always a Shabbos after. But I think even more than that, if you look at the end of the Parsha and look at the last 89 psukim, you don't have to look, you don't have to say them all, just take a look with your eyes. It's extremely repetitive. It's not totally repetitive. I'm going to tell you the differences when we get there, but it's very repetitive. The trop is duplicated. The words are duplicated for the most part, and it repeats. It goes through the gifts of the 12 Nesiim, the 12 princes of the tribes who are bringing these gifts from their own money and contributing them. The tribe of Yehuda, who is Nachshon ben Aminadav, contributes on the first day. Then Nathaniel ben Sor of the tribe of Yisachar contributes on the second day.
So it's the leaders, not
The leaders. No, just the leaders. Just the leaders.
Did I miss the meaning of Nasso? Did you say?
Nasso, the meaning of Nasso means it can mean to carry, it can mean to lift up. And in this case, it means a census.
It means what? Oh, census.
A census, right? To lift up, right? Kisisa, when we say in Parshas Kisisa, says when they took a census after the golden calf, right? So they were lifting up the heads of the people. So, and here it's also this Nasso es rosh, to lift up the head, to lift up the head. So that's taking a census. But in the end of the parsha, when the Nesiim are bringing these gifts, the reason they're bringing the gifts is because they realized they missed a huge opportunity. When the Mishkan in Parsha Truma, when Hashem told Moshe to command the people to build a Mishkan and to bring all the things that were necessary for the building of the Mishkan, the gold and the silver and the copper and the wool and the linen and all of the things that were necessary for it, the Nesiim, they said to themselves, and of course any self-respecting synagogue would love to have these kinds of people today, but they said, you know what, you regular riffraff people, you give whatever you can, and we'll give the rest. And guess what? All the people, other than the Nesiim, gave everything. And Hashem even, and Moshe even had to tell them, stop, we have too much. And the only things that the Nesiim could bring were the stones, the Evans, Nesiim, the stones that filled in the breastplate and the shoulder straps of the Hoshen Mishpat. That was all that was left. And those actually came down with the man, so they didn't have to even work for those or carry them or anything. They were there. So they felt that they had missed an opportunity. And because they were arrogant, and they said, oh, I don't think you people are going to be able to raise whatever you need to build this Mishkan, but we'll come in and save the day. There was no day to save. So they lost that opportunity. So they didn't want to lose the opportunity at the time of the inauguration of the Mishkan, which was later. This was commanded on the day after Yom Kippur, when Moshe came down with the second tablets. And so from that time until they actually finished the Mishkan on Hanukkah, 25th of Nisan, but they didn't erect it and inaugurate it until the 1st of Nisan, that following 1st of Nisan. So by that time, so they had learned their lesson, so they wanted to bring these gifts, so they brought these gifts. I'll talk more about them later because it's a big part of the Parsha, but that's the reason the Parsha is as long as it is, and it's part of what makes it the apex, I think, of the Chumash. Okay, so if we start off in the beginning of the Parsha, we see that it's a carryover from last week's Parsha. The last Aliyah of last week's Parsha gave us the job in the census of Kohas. And Kohas had the job in the census of carrying the kalim of the Mishkan. So they carried the ark, they carried the menorah, they carried the table, but only after the Kohanim had put them away in these techeles bags, in these blue bags. Vessels like the menorah and the table, the shulchan, and the aron, and the mizbeach, the golden mizbeach, and the copper mizbeach.
Have you heard of the term like kalimi or kalimi, to do like instead of saying Jewish? Have you ever heard that before? I want to know where that comes from.
No, what does it mean?
I don't know. I'm looking for.
Tell me again. Tell me more.
Well,
What is it?
In Iran, a respectful way of saying somebody's Jewish is that we say they're kalimi. And I wonder.
Did we say that you're vessels of Hashem, you're vessels that hold holiness? That would be a nice thing to say. I'm working constantly on trying to make myself a keli, make myself a vessel to hold on to more bracha. I told you before, right? I think I told you this, that you know what the biggest vessel that we need to have to hold on to any bracha, I'm sure I told you this, is shalom, is peace. Now, if you think about it, the last word of every major bracha that we say, like the end of benching, for example, the end of the Birchas Kohanim, the end of the Shemona Esrei, it all ends in shalom because it's holding on to all of those brachas. And without shalom, Hashem even says, without shalom, you really don't have anything, because you can't hold on to any of the brachas that come if you don't have a vessel to hold on to it. And if you don't have peace, then you don't have anything really.
But she said that they call the people
Kalim.
which are vessels.
No, if you want to say somebody's Jewish, or you refer, instead of saying Jewish, you say kalimi. So you can say Yahudi. In Iran, we say Yahudi. If you say Juhud, it has a bit of a rude meaning. And if you say kalimi, it's the most respectful way of saying somebody's Jewish. So
Wow.
I'm looking for.
So I just surmised that it was talking about kalim.
It could be that, because I haven't found anything more.
And that is that you're saying that to these people that are Jewish, that you're the vessels for Hashem's bracha.
Yeah.
Is there a Persian word?
Yeah, this is it. I don't know. I couldn't find the root. I'm looking for it. That's why I just picked up on that word now.
Okay. So we carry over from Kahas, we go now to the two other sons of Levi, Gershon and Merari. And so Gershon is involved in carrying the tapestries and the ram skins and the goat skins and so forth. And so he's involved in carrying, or his descendants, right, are involved in carrying that.
Mhm.
And Merari carries the big stuff, the karashim, the beams that are gold covered and so forth. Yes, sir.
From reading here, it says from 30 years of age and up.
Right.
Now, normally it's from 20 years because
20 years
military
is
service is 20 to 50.
20 years is only for people other than the Levium. Remember last week, we said we only count the non-Levium in the army. The Levium are actually counted from 30 days and up, but for purposes of doing the work, because it's hard work, it's from 30 to 50. 30 to 50. There's another place a little bit later which says that they're 25 to 50. And the reason for that is because they start training at 25 to do the job, and then they work from 30 to 50. But before 50, they're really too weak. They're not full grown in their strength. And after age 50, I hate to tell all of us here at this table, they're now too weak. Not Yasmin. You're excluded. Not Madeline, not Therese. Only the men.
We never had the strength.
Okay, so the Parshat then starts off with going through, picking up with Gershon and then Merari in terms of what they do. And then it totals them up, right? And it gives a total of 8,580. Those are the men between 30 and 50. Those are the men that are going to be doing the work. And then there's a very interesting thing. We go to chapter 5, and this is an amazing thing that I think is really important. Part of it is because of a Masechta that I've been studying called Masechta Shavuos, which talks about Tumas Mikdash V'Kedoshav. It talks about being Tameh, the sin of being Tameh and going into the base of Mikdash. And that's what this next part deals with, is that it's talking about that the Jewish people have to be tahar. They have to be tahar. Now, bad translation, right? Tameh is ritually impure. Bad translation. Tahar is ritually pure. Bad translation. It's an upper level than that. Basically, if a person's tameh, there are certain things that the person cannot do. There are certain places that the person cannot go. If a person's tahar, then those places are open for him, and those things are open for him. So a person, for example, cannot eat korbanos if they're tameh. They can't go to the base of Mikdash if they're tameh. If a person's tahar, then he can. It applies to men and women. Also, if a woman is tameh, then she can't be with her husband, right? In certain kind of tuma. And so there's basically restrictions that apply on tameh that do not apply on tahar. Okay, and it's a spiritual thing. It's totally it's not physical at all. It's got no materiality to it. It can be caused by material things, touching a dead sheretz or touching a nevela, which is an animal that died by means other than a kosher shkita. It can be caused by physical things, a dead body. It's caused by the tuma is caused by the decay of the physicality. When the physicality decays, that's what causes the tuma. Because it no longer has the spirituality holding it up. Once the spirituality leaves, then it decays. So if you think about a human being passes away, what happens? The neshama leaves. That's why it's called a patira. It's called the exiting of the neshama.
It's free.
That's
free from the body.
okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
All right. And so it leaves. And then there's actually a little bit of it that stays behind for T.S. Amazing, but that's a different story. I won't go into that now. But basically the neshama leaves and then the body deteriorates. And that deterioration is tuma. It's a deterioration, the decay of the physicality. Everything in the world, I think there's one exception to this, everything that's material in the world decays, gets worse with age, includes us. There's an exception to that, I think, is wine. I think wine, because wine is the gematria of 70, which is yesod, which is secret, which is yesod or foundation, also secret. But wine gets better with age, right? I don't know whether it ever, I guess it spoils at some point, maybe. I don't know.
I think cheap wine goes bad.
Cheap wine goes bad, but good wine I'm talking about. Doesn't good wine get better with age? I mean, I'm not a wine connoisseur, but that.
Depends on how you keep it, exactly.
But I have friends that drink a lot of wine. The paper bags. No, that's my other group of friends. That's my non-Aish friends. My Aish friends, they always, even with the one little pinky out,
Is the term entropy when material deteriorates?
Yes.
Entropy, it's in the universe, am I right?
It's in the universe. But it doesn't happen to our neshamas. It doesn't happen to the Torah. It doesn't happen to Hashem. And I guess it doesn't happen with wine. Not the same way. But right, but it's basically that's what's happening is we're having the decay. And that's what creates a tumah. That's what creates a tumah, is the decay of the physicality. Okay, so here we see that there is we have a mitzvah that the Jewish people are commanded that they'll expel from the camp anyone with certain kinds of tumah. The first one is saras. Saras is a tumah when a person gets something, skin disease, which is actually a physical manifestation of a spiritual issue, generally caused by arrogance. And they're basically, the Gemara says 7 sins, but there's midrashim that say 10 sins. It could be lashon hara, it could be arrogance, it could be stinginess, a variety of different things that would cause that. So that's saras. And the person with saras has to go out of all 3 camps. There's a camp of the Shekhinah, which is where the Mishkan is. There's the camp of the Levium. The Levium are camped around the Mishkan. And then there's the camp of the Yisraelim. And the Metzorah has to go out of all 3 camps. Okay?
They were isolated.
They were isolated because they did things to isolate others. Because if you think about this in terms of lashon hara, that if people say bad things about people, that causes those people who are the subject of that lashon hara to be kind of thought of in a negative way, and people stay away from them. And so they cause that kind of isolation. So that's their mita keneged mita.
But they were isolated, but they were placed together, or they were separated.
No, they were separated from each other. Nobody could come within Dalet Amos of them, with about 7 or 8 feet. Couldn't get within 7 or 8 feet of a Metzorah. There's a machlokas about whether or not a Metzorah's wife could come with him and be with him or not.
Condition leprosy, or was it?
It's a skin disease, but they unfortunately translated it back in the old Hertz Chumash. Do you remember the Hertz Chumash?
No.
Oh, well, anyway, they translated it as leprosy there, which is a bad translation. It's not leprosy.
That's why I heard something about.
I remember Rabbi Samuel Edelman when I was a little kid. It's before I was bar mitzvah, and I was sitting in BMH in the big sanctuary on 16th and Gaylord, and I remember we were, that was a big, bima that they had, and he was standing up there and he was talking about Parshat Metzorah, and he said, "This is not leprosy."
Oh,
That's the one thing I learned when I was a kid.
But we don't have it anymore.
Yeah, but is there a modern?
We don't have it anymore because we are too thick. Our generation is too low to have that kind of sensitivity. So we don't have that spiritual sensitivity anymore. Correct.
In the medical condition, it doesn't exist in the modern era.
No.
Well, leprosy may, but
Well, yeah.
this doesn't. This does not. This does not.
So how's it connected to decay?
How is Metzora connected to decay? Because the skin decays on the person's body.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, then
It's like high blood sugar.
a Zav emission. This can be a Zav or a Zava for a male or a female, and it's an emission from the sexual organs, from the organs of regeneration. An abnormal emission for a man, and for a woman, it's an abnormal time. It's an emission of blood, but it's not at the time of the regular period. And so it's an abnormal. And so that person becomes tameh to where they have to go out of the two camps. They have to go out of the camp of the Shekhinah and out of the camp of Levium, but they can stay in the camp of the Israeli. And then there's contamination of the human corpse, which is a dead human being. And that, really interestingly enough, only people who are tameh tumas mace with a contamination of a human corpse only have to go out of one camp. That's the camp of the Shekhinah. But they can be in the camp of Levium and they can be in the camp of the Israeli.
Wow.
So, and that's male and female alike, right? You shall expel, and they shall not contaminate the camps, among which, says the Chumash, I dwell, I meaning Hashem, because Hashem is dwelling with us. So therefore, he wants to dwell in a place of Tahara and not Tumah.
So he doesn't dwell in those.
Yeah, Hashem is everywhere, right? You know, by every little kid, if you just ask him, where's Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere. Right? So, of course, but there are certain places where we don't do certain things. For example, in the bathroom, we don't say the names of Hashem, right? If we're in unclean places, we do not do that. It's a reference to the holiness of Hashem. Of course, Hashem is everywhere, but there are more places. There are places that are more appropriate, and there are places that are less appropriate. And so, when one is tummy, so it's a less appropriate place. So
These are really clear articulations regarding where you end up, so to speak. Is there any uncertainty regarding this? Let's say a certain condition, whatever it may be.
right.
Is there any uncertainty regarding where they end up? As far as the different camps, you want to put them in these different camps.
No, there's only 3 different camps, and then once you have that kind of tuma, there are uncertainties. There's a doubt about whether or not a person's tummy or not.
Okay.
Okay, because for example, with the Kohen looking at the tsaras of a person, so sometimes he doesn't know whether it's tsaras or not. So he puts a person into quarantine for 7 days,
Right.
and then comes back and looks at it again. And then if he knows, then the person either is tahor or tummy. And then there's also doubts about whether or not, like, a person's walking down an alley and a person says, you know what, there was a dead sheretz in that alley, and the person doesn't know where he touched it or not. Or we don't know whether there was a mace, but there's that kind of suffix. But once you have the answer, then you know that you got to go out of, right. And the camps are clear.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. And then there's a discussion here about a particular, this is a repetition from something that was in the first Parsha of Sefer Vayikra, Parsha Vayikra, and it deals with a man or a woman who commits any of man's sins by committing a mo'il, a me'ilah, a treachery is the way they translate it in the Art Scroll. It means that they took something that's not theirs. It can happen by taking something that is hektish, which means that it's God's, and using it for a mundane purpose, or by when somebody, like I just took my watch in to be fixed, and you give your watch to the watchmaker, right? And then you go to pick it up, and they say, "Never heard of you," right? So then they make an oath that they never heard of you, or that it or was damaged or was stolen, something that they're not going to be liable for paying you for. And then that oath turns out to be wrong. So they have to pay the principal plus 20% as a penalty, and then plus bring in Korban Osham. And that's what this is about. That's what this part is about right here. And that's the ram of atonement. That's the Korban Osham that they have to bring.
Which page is that?
753.
So what would be an example of something, let's say, sacred that's used for a profane purpose? What would be a graphic
The graphic example is that in the days when we had the temple, so I might designate a female sheep or a female goat as a korban chatos, as a sin offering for myself.
Okay.
And then if I took it for a joyride around the corral, that would be using it for a mundane purpose.
Okay.
Okay. And so that would be the me'ilah. I would have to then pay back the temple the principal value of my joyride. It has to be at least a pruta, right? Which is the minimum amount, which nowadays we'd say probably is a dime. And I would have to also give a chomesh. I'd have to give an extra fifth, and then I would have to also give the korban. So that would be the example. If I took something that I designated, let's say a person said, I'm going to give this chair to Aish of the Rockies. And then he sat in the chair.
Okay.
Right. That would be another graphic example.
Does a sin offering have to be for a specific sin? Or it can look like
A sin offering,
all day I must.
so a sin offering, a chatos, so that has to be for any one of the prohibitory mitzvahs that are punishable by kores, which is a spiritual punishment, kores or greater. So kores or misa that's exacted by man, misa bidei adam. And if a person does one of those kinds of sins, he brings a korban chatos for that, and that has to be specified by the kohen when he's bringing the korban. The asham there are only 6 kinds of korban ashamas, and that's got to be a male sheep, which is a ram, either in its first year or in its second year, depending on what it's for. There's 6. One of them is for a me'ilah, for using something of the temples that's using it for mundane purposes. One of them is for lying on an oath of a shomer, where the watchmaker lies and says, no, you never gave me the watch, and then swears about it, and then he recants on the shvuah. He's got to bring a korban asham. Then there's the shifcha arufa. The shifcha arufa is a very interesting thing. This is a slave woman, a Canaanite slave woman, who is half free and half slave woman. So basically, she was owned by a particular person. He died. He had 2 sons. Each son inherited half of the slave woman. One of them said, free my half. So she's half free. And the other half, the guy still owns her. So she's half slave, half Canaanite slave, and half Jewish person. Because once a Canaanite slave is freed, she becomes automatically Jewish. So half free and half slave. And she then is designated to an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri is a Jewish slave, and the master can designate a slave woman for the Jewish slave. And because he's Jewish, he can also marry the Jewish half. But he's the only one that can marry a half and half slave woman, because she can't marry a regular Jewish person because of her slave half, and she can't marry a slave because of her Jewish half, but she can marry an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, because he's Jewish, as well as being able to be designated by the master to a shifcha. So he designates her to an Eved Ivri, and then someone comes in and has relations with her before they marry. And the consequence of that, he has to bring the 3rd type of korban asham. That's the 3rd kind of a korban asham. Then the 4th type of korban asham is a nazir. A nazir is a person, which we're going to talk about a little bit more when we get further on the parsha. A nazir is a person that takes on, by a single oath, he says, I am a nazir. And for a minimum period of time of 30 days, he cannot cut his hair. He cannot matama himself. He cannot become ritually impure from a dead body. And he can't eat grapes or drink grape products. Eat or drink grapes, right? So those 3 things. If he messes up and he becomes tameh during that period of time, he forfeits the days he's already served, and he has to start over. But before he starts over, he has to bring karbanos. And one of the karbanos he has to bring is the asham nazir, right? And that's a 1-year-old ram. And then the 5th type is the asham mitzora. And that is when the Metzora is coming back into the camp. The Tzaras has gone away. The Kohen now sees that he's healed. And then he goes through the 7-day process, which he brings 2 birds and he shucks one of them, puts the blood in, and he dips it in with a cedar stick and with a hyssop and with a red string. And then he gets sprinkled with it. And then he goes for 7 days. And then he goes to the mikveh. And then the next day he has to bring a korban. And one of the korbanos he brings is the Oshem Metzora. And the 6th Asham is, you're really pressing me. The sixth one is where you don't know whether or not you need to bring a korban chatos. You did something that's prohibited by Kores. Eating chalev, for example, or drinking blood, that's prohibited by Kores. And if a person didn't know whether he ate chalev or not, the classic example is he has a really nice steak here and a really nice steak here. This one, unfortunately, has chalev in it, which is forbidden fat. This one has shuman, which is permitted fat. And he ate from one of them.
But you don't know.
He doesn't know which one he ate from. So if he wants to suspend the punishment, he has to bring a korban oshem toiloi, which is called a suspended oshem. And that suspends his punishment until he figures it out. When he figures it out, if he did eat from the chalev, he has to bring a korban chatos. If he didn't, he's okay. Okay, and those are the 6 ashamas. And so those are specific. So those also have to be specific. There's a korban ola. These are the 3 kodesh kedoshim, the highest form of offerings. The ola is a voluntary offering, but a lot of people bring it if they have a bad thought, because a bad thought might take them away from their relationship with Hashem, or if they don't do a positive mitzvah. There's no punishment for not doing a positive mitzvah. So if a person doesn't put on tefillin, for example, or if a woman doesn't like Shabbos candles, or there are other things that women do if they don't like the Shabbos candles one week. But basically they could bring a korban ola to rehabilitate their relationship with Hashem. So they bring a korban ola, which is completely burned on the altar. Mm-hmm. So that's just a little bit about the korbanos. This parsha really just goes in the korban oshem, and that's it. And now, when we start the 4th aliyah, this parsha has the longest 4th aliyah of any single parsha in the Torah. It's a very, very long aliyah.
4 times into 8.
And it deals with And it deals with 3 things. 3 things, and see if you can think about how these things might relate to each other. The Gemara does, and it's a hard job. The sota. The sota is a woman whose husband has come over him a spirit of jealousy. So he's jealous about this woman, and he's jealous about her particularly with spending time with a particular man. So he warns her in front of 2 witnesses that she should not seclude herself with that man. Right? If she does, and there are 2 witnesses to that seclusion, so then the husband can no longer be with his wife physically, can no longer have relations with his wife. He has to bring her up to Yerushalayim to drink this bitter waters, mayim morim, bitter waters. What the bitter waters are is he takes water from the kior. The kior is the copper kettle that was made from the mirrors of the women from Yerushalayim, from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And there's water that's kept in that, which is lowered down into a cistern every night and then brought up in the day. And the Kohanim wash their hands and feet before they do the service in the Mishkan or in the Beis Hamikdash every day, every morning, and when they're getting ready to do their service, they wash their hands and feet from that water. So he takes water from that, puts it in a kli cheres, which is a pottery cup, and then he takes dirt from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash or the floor of the Mishkan and puts the dirt in there. And then the Kohen writes out, or maybe he has it written out in advance, the parsha that we're about ready to read, which deals with the sota. These psukim that go on until page 759, till chapter 6. Okay. And so then he mixes that parchment, which has Yud Ke Vav Ke written in it several times, and he mixes that into the water, and the name of God is erased in the water. And then she drinks the water. If she was guilty of actually having relations with a person that she was warned not to be with, So then she dies a horrible death. The Torah describes it, very horrible death.
Sorry.
If she in fact did not have relations with that man, even though she was secluded with him, and she drinks the water, it's happily ever after. If they were not having a good relationship before, the relationship will now be great. If they weren't able to have kids before, if they weren't able to have kids before, they'll now be able to have kids. If she had pain in childbirth before, she won't have pain in childbirth now. It's happily ever after.
I'm really interested in this.
Okay.
What if the woman refuses to go through that ritual?
Then she has to get divorced, and she doesn't get her kasuba.
Okay, and then let's go one step
Money.
further. She drinks the love potion. Are you telling me she's going to die if she had relations, and she's not going to die and live happily ever after if she doesn't?
Correct.
Is that is that the way this is supposed to work?
That's the way this works. But it stopped working pretty quickly, into the second temple, into the first temple era. Stopped working right at the beginning of the second temple because the number of adulterers in Israel increased, unfortunately, and the same with murderers. And so this ritual ceased to work because if the husband's guilty of anything, for example, it doesn't work. The waters don't work. So when that proliferated, so the Gemara says that it stopped. But it worked for a while.
So this is a terrific formula for solving problems in America.
Exactly. And I'll tell you,
The guy's not jealous. He says, I'm jealous.
on Rosh Hashanah, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we lay in a Haftorah from Shmuel about Hannah. Hannah davened to Hashem to have children, right? She was a co-wife with Penina, and Penina was giving her, taunting her about not having children. Penina had a lot of children, and Hannah didn't have any. And so Hannah davened to have a child, and she ended up having Shmuel, who's a big prophet. And in her tefillah, the Gemara goes into it, doesn't go into it in the Haftorah with this detail, but she davens to Hashem and she says, Hashem, if you will not give me a child, then I will become a sota. I'll make my husband jealous. I'll have him warn me not to be with a particular person. I'll go and seclude myself with that person. I won't do anything. And then I'll come up to the Beis HaMikdash. I'll drink the water. I won't be killed. Everything will be happily ever after, and I'll have a child. So either give me a child or make me go through all that trouble. Right, a little bit of blackmail. But sometimes we need to be chutzpahdik with Hashem. I mean, I hate to say this, but like Moshe Rabbeinu was, when he wanted the Jewish people to be saved, he said, Hashem, if you wipe out this people, take me out of the book. Take me out of your book. I don't want any part of it. And so sometimes you have to be a little bit chutzpahdik with Hashem to do that. We did that. We had a year where we had 2 very sick babies. And we did it in this class. We davened, so some people will remember that we davened that way. We said, Hashem, how could people that are giving so much to the Jewish community, and especially, to Aish of the Rockies, and they're giving so much tzedakah, and they're really caring about this community, how could they have problems with their children? In one case, it was grandchild. And we davened for that, and guess what? Both of those kids are now alive and well. They both had their bar mitzvahs. They both had their bar mitzvahs this last year.
Oh, wow.
A miracle. Because of the davening, because we were kind of chutzpahdik, we said, how could it be, Hashem? People are going to get the wrong idea. People are going to say, if you're good to Aish of the Rockies and you give big contributions to Aish of the Rockies, then bad things happen to you. Who's going to want to give? You want to give because good things happen.
It's good to know. I'm going to try it.
There you go. Okay. So that's the sota. That's a little bit of the story about the sota. There's a whole masechta in Talmud Bavli about the sota. Very important masechta. I've read parts of it to you before because it talks about the days preceding the Mashiach, which is the days that we're in right now. We're waiting for Mashiach to come any minute. Any minute. Yeah. But we are now, especially,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you have something like what happened in Boulder. It's time for Mashiach to come. It's just time. It's just so painful.
That couple had several surgeries, very painful.
Very painful.
Okay. Then the next thing that's in this aliyah, this fourth aliyah, this long aliyah, is the nazir that I mentioned to you before. This is a person who decides he wants to become holier. And the Gemara is very critical of this kind of person, right? Because it breeds about a type of arrogance. But the Gemara does bring an example of somebody who did this for the right reasons, right? And so it is possible to increase one's level of holiness. And the Gemara brings a relationship between the sota and the nazir. And that is that the proceeding of the sota is very demeaning to the woman, even before she drinks, very demeaning to her. And they rip her clothes off and they take her sheitel off, and there may be young people who are in the Beis Hamikdash or in the vicinity of the Mishkan that see what's going on. And therefore, because of that, they may have illicit thoughts. And because of that, they need to, in some way, separate themselves from those thoughts by doing something affirmative, by basically taking something on that creates a separation for them from things that would otherwise be enticing. Because one reason why this woman might be in the position she is maybe because she was drunk. Maybe she drank wine. So therefore, they don't drink wine. The Nazir doesn't drink wine. And he doesn't associate himself with anything that's decaying, tumas mace, right? And he doesn't cut his hair because generally keeping a neat haircut is something that is generally good. Generally makes a man handsome, but if it has long hair, sometimes it's not so. Sometimes it's more. But and so therefore, by growing the hair, it may be a good way to give a person humility, or by cutting the hair at the end, it may be, because now when he's completely bald, so maybe they'll be more humble. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so those are the things that relate to this. So he's staying away, he's separating himself out from this temptation, from these bad thoughts that he's having that were elicited by watching the procedure of the sota. And so then he takes care of it in that way. And that's the nazar. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not correct. But a woman who wants a divorce and her husband won't sign yet, she can go seclude herself, not drink the potion, and get divorced.
But she'll lose the money.
But
She'll get a get. That's true. But money talks. She's going to be all on her own. Women didn't, necessarily work for paying jobs in those days. And if they go away without a kasuba, that'd be a huge loss. Kasuba is 200 zuz, minimum. Could be much more than that.
What's zuz?
So I'm going to explain how it is in modern terms. So 200 zuz in those days was the amount of at least a year's worth of expenses, right? So today, what would you say, $50,000? Something like that. It's a year's worth of expenses, basically, is what it would be worth. And a kasuba could be much more, because Rabbi Torsby made my kasuba 18,000 zuz. He said, you're not getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
So
he's pushing you to commit murder, right?
I didn't even think of that.
Oh my goodness.
He knew I was too pure to think of something like that. Okay. What's the third thing in this long fourth aliyah? The Birchas Kohanim. The Birchas Kohanim. This is the actual language that the Kohanim to this very day, if you were here on Shavuos, both the first and the second day, the Kohanim duchend, and this is the language that they duchend. to this very day. And the tune that they sing is supposedly goes back to the base of Mikdash. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Which base that because
I presume the second. I presume the second. The first would be too miraculous almost, you know. But I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Certainly the words go back to the Mishkan. So that's the Birchas Kohanim. And I think, what's the tie-in of the Birchas Kohanim to the Sota and to the Nazir, that they're all three in this one aliyah? They're all next to each other in the Torah, and they're all three in this one aliyah. I suggest to you there's something that I mentioned before, and that is that the bracha for everything is shalom. And what comes about through the Sota waters, if the woman is not matami, is not defiled, then will be peace, because it'll be a happily ever after. It'll be a peace. And what is the Nazir after in terms of what he's trying to do? He's after peace. He wants to stay away from the temptations and to get to a level where he's at peace and where he can hold on to the bracha. So I'm just suggesting that to you. There are many, I'm sure, many reasons. And so you should continue to think about it, about what the association is, because it's all in one aliyah. They're all right next to each other. Sota, Nazir, Birchas HaKohanim, and that's when the fourth aliyah ends. And then beginning with the fifth aliyah is the whole end of this parsha. It goes all the way to page 773, where it totals up all of the gifts that were given by the Nesiim. So this is where the gifts of the Nesiim begin. So this is 89 Pesukim. I think I'm right. I'll double check myself. Yep, 89 Pesukim.
Where do you see the number, brother? Where do you see the 89?
So if you look at the verse numbers on page 773, or you can look at it on the Hebrew side and it says Peites. Peites is 89. Do you see where it says number 89? Look at the English side.
Oh, yes.
You see it?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Stop worrying.
Because it's all one chapter. Okay. And this is what makes this parsha 176 psukim, which makes it the apex. So what's going on with these gifts? What's so special about these gifts? Or the people that are giving exactly correct.
What? Repeat that, please.
so much stress.
What?
She made me look at that.
What was that? We missed that answer.
You have to say it louder. Reb Cousin.
There's no upsmanship. In other words, nobody was trying to do better than the next guy.
No one upsmanship.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, that's what it's about, and it comes right after Shavuos. Before Shavuos, we had Parshat Midbar, where we camped around the Mishkan, and we all had our own mission. We all had our own jobs. We weren't jealous of each other. Everything was at peace. And this also is a way to peace by not trying to one-ups. Now, this is so critical, and it's only 2 words. It's only 2 words. But if you look at the first 2 tribes that bring the gifts, the Nasi of the tribe, Nachshon ben Aminadav, this is on page 767, verse 12, Nachshon ben Aminadav of the tribe of Yehuda. And if you look on the second day, Nasanel ben Soar from the tribe of Yisachar. And then if you look at the next tribes, you'll see their names and which tribe they're in. And they all bring exactly the same gifts, but there's a difference in, and the trup is exactly the same, the notes are exactly the same. But what's different is this. If you look at Nasano ben Tzor of the tribe of Yisachar, so he is bringing second, B'yom HaSheni, on the second day. And it says in the second line of his paragraph, this is line Yud Tes on the Hebrew. You have to go to the Hebrew side on this. I don't think you'll be able to pick it up on the English.
Okay.
It says in the first
Page again.
page, 766. Go down about 3/4 of the page, 2/3 of the page.
Mhm.
There's a Yud Tes.
Yeah.
Okay. Then it says Hikriv S. Hikriv S. It's a little unclear in Yehuda, so I'm going to take you to the next page, to the tribe of Zevulun. And in the tribe of Zevulun, it says in the last word of the first line at the top of the page, next page, 768, last word of the first line, it says Carbono. It doesn't say Hikriv S, but with Nisano ben Sar of the tribe of Yisachar, it says Hikriv S Carbono. All the other tribes are all Carbono, 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 all 12 tribes, but not Nisano ben Sar of the tribe of Yisachar. He was the second one, and it says Hikriv S. Rashi, when Rashi describes the Kabbalah of the gifts that were brought, which we have a few more minutes, I'll go into a little bit about what that is. But Rashi describes that Kabbalah of the gifts after Nisano ben Sor. He doesn't describe it after Nachshon ben Aminadab of the tribe of Yehuda. He waits until Nisano ben Sor. And he says why. He says, why did the Torah say Hikriv? Why did the Torah say Hikriv es Karbonov for him and not for any of the others? And he says with the tribe of Yisachar, which was not said with any of the other tribes, because two reasons. First is Reuven came to Moshe and he said to Moshe, you've made me give up a lot. I'm the firstborn. My tribe is the firstborn. My father, my grandfather was the firstborn. Reuven was the firstborn. And okay, you want him to go after Yehuda because Yehuda is the king. I can accept that. But I can't accept not going second. At least I should be second. Why are you putting me fourth? Because if you look at this order, this is the order of the way the encampments were. This is the order of the way of the travels. And the first was the camp of Yehuda, which was Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun. The second camp was Reuven, Shimon, and Gad. The third camp was Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And the last camp was Asher, and Naphtali. And so those are the four camps around. Those are the four camps of three tribes each, not the Levies, right? Because the Levies were on the inside. So the encampments were done in this way, and that meant that Reuven was fourth. And Moshe says back to Reuven, to the tribe of Reuven, and says, first of all, what Reuven said was, is it not enough that my brother Yehuda went ahead of me? I shall offer immediately after him. And Moshe said, I have directly from the Almighty. It was said to me that the princes should offer according to the order of their travels. And that means Yisachar goes next, and you go fourth. And so because of this, that's why it says, Hikriv es Karbono. That's why it puts Yisachar second. So then Rashi goes on, and he says, what is meant by he offered, being said twice there, for he became worthy of offering the second among the tribes because of two things. One reason is that Yisachar was able to come second, that Nisano ben Sara, the prince of the tribe of Yisachar, came second, is that they were knowledgeable in Torah. We have coming up in a couple of weeks, the Yeshiva Parlor meeting, which is a partnership between Zevulun and Yisachar. Because Zevulun was a very wealthy tribe. They were involved in business, and they made a deal with Yisachar. We'll support you if you'll give us part of your Torah learning, which is what we do with the people that come to the parlor meeting for the yeshiva, is we say, you give us contributions, and then the boys' learning will be partially yours. You'll get to share in that learning. It's an amazing, amazing benefit. It's amazing, amazing benefit. Now, you may not recognize it until you get to Olam Haba, but when you get there, you'll say, wow, this is great.
Looking forward.
So of the sons of Yisachar, it says those were those who had understanding of the times. So they had great depth in their Torah learning. And then he says, and he heard from his Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, which if you were here last week when I spoke about the Akdamas, this is a Rebbe of Rashi, who was the contemporary of the author of the Akdamas that I talked about last week, a little bit, the Akdamas. So he says that the reason why Yisachar came second was because it was the idea of Nathaniel ben Saur, who was the prince of that tribe, to give the gifts. It was his idea. But the commentaries ask on Rashi, what do you mean it was his idea? There's a midrash that says all of the Nesiim, all of the princes of the tribes, came up with the idea of what to give independently. It's like when we daven Shemona Esrei, we're all saying the same words, but we all have our own kavanas that are going into it. And so they came up with the same things to give, but for different reasons. But according to the midrash, they all thought of those reasons for their own selves, differently and independently, and decided what to give this bowl, to give this incense, and so forth. And they all gave the same thing, which was miraculous in and of itself. But how do you square that with Rashi, which says that it's his idea? So the way you square it, the way that people answer for Rashi, is to say it was his idea. What was his idea? His idea was not to give one thing more than the tribe of Yehuda gave. Because Nachshon ben Aminadav gave these things, and he saw what they were because it happened the day before. So he could have gotten one more thing and just added it on. And if he would have gotten one more thing and added it on, then the next tribe would have gotten one more thing and added it on, and so forth and so on. And everyone would have tried to one-ups everybody else. So as my cousin says, you don't do that. And that's what the idea was, that Yisachar, that Nathaniel ben Saur of the tribe of Yisachar came up with. Don't one-ups. Give exactly the same thing. And then when he did that, all the other tribes followed suit. And so basically no one one-ups. And that is a reason why we repeat everything instead of just saying, and the tribe of Yisachar gave the same thing that the tribe of Yehuda did, and the tribe of Zebulun gave the same thing the tribe of Yisachar did, and the tribe of Reuben gave the same thing that the tribe of Zebulun gave. Instead of saying it that way, we draw it out and we repeat it, because each one gets his own individual credit for the fact that he was not one-upsing, and we see it over and over again and learn the lesson, hopefully very well. We're not supposed to one-ups each other.
Does he get an extra mitzvah if he gives one less than Yehuda?
No.
That's kind of lacking humility to do something.
Yeah, I mean, basically, a lot of times what you need to do is to do the same thing as everybody else. When we daven, that's why I say, the main point that I wanted to raise from the davening, when we daven, we say the same words. We're all saying the same words, but we all have our own thoughts, heart, emotion into the davening, which is unique, which each tribe had, but it needs to be the same thing. It needs to be uniform so that we're not adding on or subtracting. And it says in the Torah, it's not in exactly this context. It says, don't add on and don't subtract. Do what you need to do. Okay, that's it. Have a wonderful Shabbos.